welcome to the 1,000 Nights and One Night. Now, when it was the 280th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Issac of Mosul continued. Then the damsel called for food. When it was served to her, she fell to eating it, and setting it before me. And the sitting room was full of all manner of sweet-scented flowers and rare fruits, such are never found save in a king's house. Presently she called for wine, and drank a cup, after which she filled another, and gave it to me, saying, Now is the time for converse and story-telling. So I bethought myself, and began to say, It hath reached me that such and such things happened, and there was a man who said so and so, till I had her a number of pleasing tales and adventures, with which she delighted, and cried, "'Tis marvellous that a merchant should bear in memory such store of stories like these, for they are fit for the kings." Quoth I had a neighbor who used to consort with kings, and carouse with them, so when he was at leisure I visited his house, and he hath often told me what thou hast heard. Thereupon she exclaimed, By my life, but thou hast a good memory. So we continued to converse thus, and as often as I was silent, she would begin, till in this way we passed the most part of the night, whilst the burning aloes was diffused its fragrance. And I was in such case that if Al-Mamun had suspected it, he would have flown like a bird with longing for it. Then said she to me, Verily, thou art one of the most pleasant of men, polished, passing well-bred and polite. But there lacketh one thing. What is that? Asked I. And she answered, If thou only knew how to sing verses to the lute. I answered, I was passionately fond of this art aforetime, but finding I had no taste for it, I abandoned it, though at times my heart yearneth after it. Indeed, I should love to sing somewhat well at this moment, and fulfill my night's enjoyment. Then said she, Meseemeth thou hintest a wish for the lute to be brought. And I, It is thine to decide, if thou wilt so far favour me, and thee be the thanks. So she called for a lute, and sang a song in a voice whose like I never heard, both of sweetness of tone, and skill in playing, and perfection of art. Then said she, Knowest thou who composed this air, and whose are the words of this song? No, answered I. And she said, The words are so-and-so's, and the air is Isaac's. I asked, And hath Isaac, then may I be thy sacrifice, such a talent? She replied, Bravo, bravo, Isaac, indeed he excelleth in his art. I rejoined, Glory be to Allah, who hath given this man what he hath vouchsafed unto none other. Then she said, And how would it be, an thou heard this song from himself? This wise, we went on till break of day dawn, when there came to her an old woman, as she were her nurse, and said to her, Verily, the time is come. So she rose in haste and said to me, Keep what hath passed between us to thyself, for such meetings are in confidence. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 281st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the damsel whispered, Keep what hath passed between us to thyself, for such meetings are in confidence. And I replied, May I be thy ransom. I needed no charge to this. Then I took leave of her, and she sent a handmaid to show me the way and open the house door. So I went forth, and I returned to my own place, where I prayed the morning prayer and slept. Now after a time there came to me a messenger from Al-Mamun, so I went to him and passed the day in his company. And when the night fell, I called to mind my yesternight's pleasure, a thing from which none but an ignoramus would abstain, and betook myself to the street, where I found the basket, and seating myself therein, was drawn up to the place in which I had passed the previous night. When the lady saw me, she said, Indeed, thou hast been assiduous. And I answered, Meseemeth rather that I am neglectful. Then we fell to discoursing, and passed the night as before in general conversation, and reciting verses and telling rare tales, each in turn, till daybreak, when I wended me home, and I prayed the dawn prayer and slept. Presently there came to me a messenger from Al-Nu'man. So I went to him and spent my day with him till nightfall, when the commander of the faithful said to me, I conjure thee to sit here whilst I go out for a want and come back. As soon as the Caliph had gone, and quite gone, my thoughts began to tempt and try me, and calling to mind my late delight, I recked little what might befall me from the Prince of True Believers. So I sprang up, and turning my back upon the sitting room, ran to the street aforesaid, where I sat down in the basket, and was drawn up as before. When the lady saw me, she said, I began to think thou art a sincere friend to us. Quoth I, Yea, by Allah. And quoth she, Hast thou made our house thine abiding place? I replied, May I be thy ransom. A guest claimeth guest rights for 3 days, and if I return after this, ye are free to spill my blood. Then we passed the night as before. And when the time of departure drew near, I bethought me that Al-Nu'man would assuredly question me, nor would ever be content save with a full explanation. So I said to her, I see thee to be of those who delight in singing. Now I have a cousin, the son of my father's brother, who is fairer than I in face, and higher of rank, and better of breeding, and he is the most intimate of Allah's creatures with Isaac. Quoth she, Art thou a parasite, and an importunate one? Quoth I, It is for thee to decide in this matter. And she said, If thy cousin be as thou hast described him, it would not mislike us to make acquaintance with him. Then, as the time was come, I left her and returned to my house. But hardly had I reached it ere the Caliph's runners came down on me and carried me before him by main force and roughly enough. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 282nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King. The Issac of Mosul continued, and hardly that I had reached my house ere the Caliph's runners came down upon me and carried me before him by main force and roughly enough. I found him seated on a chair, wroth with me, and he said to me, O Isaac, art thou a traitor to thine allegiance? Replied I, No, by Allah, O Commander of the Faithful. And he rejoined, What hast thou then to say? Tell me the truth, the whole truth. And I, Yes, I will, but in private. So he signed to his attendants, who withdrew to a distance, and I told them the case, adding, I promised her to bring thee. And he said, Thou didst well. Then we spent the day in our usual pleasure, but Al-Nu'man's heart was taken up with her, and hardly was the appointed time come when we set out. And as we went along, I cautioned him, saying, Look that thou call me not by my name before her, and I will demean myself like thine attendant. And having agreed upon this, we fared forth till we came to the place where we found 2 baskets hanging ready. As we sat down in them and were drawn up in the usual place, where the damsel came forth and saluted us. Now when Al-Nu'man saw her, he was amazed by her beauty and loveliness, and she began to entertain him with stories and verse. Presently she called for wine, and we fell to drinking, she paying him special attention, and he repaying her in kind. Then she took the lute and sang these verses. My lover came in the close of night. I rose till he sat and remained upright, and said, Sweetheart, hast thou come this hour? No fear on the watch and ward to light. Quoth he, the lover had cause to fear, but love deprived him of wits and fright. And when she ended her song, she said to me, And is this thy cousin also a merchant? I answered, Yes. And she said, Indeed ye resemble each other nearly. But when Al-Nu'man had drunk 3 pints, he grew merry and whined, and calling out, saying, Ha, Isaac! And I replied, Labaik, Adsum, O Commander of the Faithful. Whereupon quoth he, Sing me this air. Now, when the young lady learned that he was the Caliph, she withdrew to another place and disappeared, and as I had made an end of my song, Al-Nu'man said to me, see, who is the master of this house?" Whereupon an old woman hastened to make answer, saying, "It belongs to Hassan bin Saul." "Fetch him to me," said the Caliph. So she went away, and after a while, behold, in came Hassan, to whom said Al-Nu'man, "Hast thou a daughter?" He said, "Yes, and her name is Khadijah." Asked the Caliph, "Is she married?" Answered Hassan, "No, by Allah," said Al-Nu'man. "Then I ask her of thee in marriage." Replied her father, "O Commander of the Faithful, she is thy handmaid, and at thy commandment." Quoth Al-Nu'man, "I take her to wife at a present settlement of 30,000 dinars, which thou shalt receive this very morning, and when the money has been paid thee, do thou bring her to us this night." And Hassan answered, "I hear and I obey." Thereupon we went forth, and the Caliph said to me, "O Isaac, tell this story to no one." So I kept it a secret till Al-Nu'man's death. Surely never did man's life gather such pleasures as were mine those 4 days' time, when as I companioned with Al-Nu'man by day, and Khadijah by night. And by Allah, never saw I among the like of Al-Nu'man, nor among women have I set eyes on the like of Khadijah. No, no, nor on any other case near her in lively wit and pleasant speech. And Allah is all-knowing. But amongst stories is that of the sweet and the noble lady. During the season of the Meccan pilgrimage, whilst the people were making circuit about the holy house and the place of compassing, was crowded, behold, a man laid hold of the covering of Kaaba, and cried out from the bottom of his heart, saying, "I beseech thee, O Allah, that she may once again be wroth with her husband, and that I may know her." A company of the pilgrims heard him, and seized him, and carried him to the Emir of the pilgrims after a sufficiency of blows. And said they, "O Emir, we found this fellow in the holy places saying thus and thus." So the Emir commanded to hang him. But he cried, "O Emir, I conjure thee, by the virtue of the apostles, whom Allah bless and preserve, hear my story, and then do with me as thou wilt." Quoth the Emir, "Tell thy tale forthright." "Now then, O Emir," quoth the man, "that I am a sweep who works in the sheep slaughter-houses, and carries off the blood and the offals to the rubbish heaps outside the gates. And it came to pass, as I went along one day with my ass loaded, I saw the people running away, and one of them said to me, 'Into this alley, lest haply they slay thee.' Quoth I, 'What aileth the folk running away?' And one of the eunuchs who was passing said to me, 'This is the harem of one of the notables, and her eunuchs drive the people out of her way and beat them all without respect to persons.' So I turned aside with the donkey, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 283rd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that," quoth the man, "so I turned aside with the donkey, and stood still awaiting the dispersal of the crowd, and I saw a number of eunuchs and staves in their hands, followed by nigh 30 women slaves, and amongst them a lady as she were a willow wand, or a thirsty gazelle, perfect in beauty and grace and amorous languor, and all were attending upon her. Now when she came to the mouth of the passage where I stood, she turned right and left, and calling one of the castratos, whispered in his ear. And behold, he came up to me and laid hold of me, whilst another eunuch took my ass and made off with it. And when the spectators fled, the first eunuch bound me with a rope, and dragged me after him till I knew not what to do. And the people followed us, and cried after, saying, 'This is not allowed of Allah. What hath this poor scavenger done that he should be bound with ropes?' And praying the eunuchs, 'Have pity on him, and let him go, so Allah have pity on you.' And the while said in my mind, doubtless the eunuchry seized me because their mistress smelt the stink of the offal, and it sickened her. Belike she is with child or ailing, but there is no majesty, and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. So I continued walking on behind them till they stopped at the door of a great house, and entering before me, brought me into a big hall. I know not how I shall describe its magnificence, furnished with the finest furniture. And the women also entered the hall. And I bound and held by the eunuch, and saying to myself, doubtless they will torture me here till I die, and none will know of my death. How after a while they carried me into the neat bathroom leading out of the hall, and as I sat there, behold, in came 3 slave girls, who seated themselves round me and said to me, strip off thy rags and tatters. So I pulled off my threadbare clothes, and one of them felt a rubbing at my legs and feet, whilst another scrubbed my head, and a third shampooed my body. When they had made an end of washing me, they brought me a parcel of clothes, and said to me, put these on. And I answered, by Allah, I know not how. So they came up to me, they dressed me, laughing together at me the while, after which they brought casting bottles full of rose water, and sprinkled me therewith. Then I went out with them into another saloon. By Allah, I know not how to praise its splendor, for the wealth of paintings and furniture therein. Entering it, I saw a person seated on a couch of Indian rattan. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 284th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the sweep continued. When I entered that saloon, I saw a person seated on a couch of Indian rattan, with ivory feet, and before her a number of damsels. When she saw me, she rose to meet me and called me. So I went up to her, and she seated me by her side. Then she bade her slave girls bring food, and they brought all manner of rich meats, such as I have never seen in all my life. I do not even know the names of the dishes, much less their nature. So I ate my fill, and when the dishes had been taken away, and we had washed our hands, she called for fruits, which came without stay or delay, and ordered me to eat of them. And when we had ended eating, she bade one of the waiting women bring the wine furniture. So they set out flagons of divers kinds of wines, and burned perfumes in all the censers. What while a damsel like the moon rose and served us the wine to the sound of the smitten strings. And I drank, and the lady drank, till we were seized with wine, and the whole time I doubted not but that all this was an illusion of sleep. Presently she signed to me, to one of the damsels, to spread us a bed in such and such a place, which being done, she rose and took me by the hand, and led me thither, and lay down, and I lay with her till the morning. And as often as I pressed her to my breast, I smelt the delicious fragrance of musk and other perfumes that exhaled from her, and could not think otherwise but that I was in paradise, or in the vain fantasies of a dream. Now, when it was day, she asked me where I lodged, and I told her in such a place. Whereupon she gave me leave to depart, handing to me a kerchief worked with gold and silver, and containing somewhat tied in it, and took leave of me, saying, go to the bath with this. I rejoiced, and said to myself, if there be but 5 coppers here, it will buy me this day my morning meal. Then I left her, though I were leaving paradise, and returned to my poor crib, where I opened the kerchief, and found in it 50 miskals of gold. So I buried them in the ground, and buying 2 farthings worth of bread and kitchen, seated me at the floor, and broke my fast. After which I sat pondering my case, and continued so doing till the time of afternoon prayer, when lo, a slave girl accosted me, saying, my mistress calleth for thee. I followed her to the house aforesaid, and after asking permission, she carried me into the lady, before whom I kissed the ground, and she commanded me to sit, and called for meat and wine as on the previous day, after which again lay with her all night. On the morrow she gave me a second kerchief with the other 50 dinars therein, and I took it, and going home buried this also. In such pleasant condition I continued 8 days running, going into her at the hour of afternoon prayer, and leaving her at daybreak. But on the 8th night, as I lay with her, behold, one of the slave girls came running, and said to me, arise, and go into yonder closet. So I arose, and went into the yonder closet, which was over the gate, and presently I heard a great clamor and tramp of horse, and looking out of the window which gave on the street in the front of the house, I saw a young man, as he wore the rising moon on the night of fullness, came riding up, attended by a number of servants and soldiers who were about him on foot. He alighted at the door, and entering the saloon, found the lady seated on the couch. So he kissed the ground between her hands, then came up to her and kissed her hands, but she would not speak to him. However, he continued patiently to humble himself and soothe her and speak her fair, till he made his peace with her, and as they lay together that night. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 285th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the scavenger continued. Now, when her husband had made his peace with the young lady, he lay with her that night, and next morning the soldiers came for him, and he mounted and rode away. Whereupon she drew near to me and said, Sawest thou yonder man? I answered, Yes. And she said, He is my husband, and I will tell thee what befell me with him. And it came to pass one day that we were sitting, he and I, in the garden within the house, and behold, he rose from my side and was absent for a long while, till I grew tired of waiting, and said to myself, Most like he is in the privy. So I arose and went to the water closet, but not finding him there, went down to the kitchen, where I saw a slave girl. And when I inquired for him, she showed him to me lying with one of the cookmaids. However, I swore a great oath that I assuredly would do adultery with the foulest and the filthiest man in Baghdad. And the day the eunuch laid hands on me, I had been 4 days going around about the city in quest of one who should answer to this description, but found none fouler or filthier than thy good self. So I took thee, and there passed between us that which Allah foreordained us, and now I am quit of my oath. Then she added, If, however, my husband return yet again to the cookmaid, and lie with her, I will restore thee to thy lost place in my favors. Now when I heard these words from her lips, what while she pierced my heart with the shafts of her glares, my tears streamed forth, till my eyelids were chafed sore with weeping, and I repeated the saying of the poet, Grant me the kiss of that left hand 10 times, and learned hath than right hand higher grade. For 'tis but little since that same left hand washed off Sir Reverence when ablution made. Then she made them give me 50 dinars, making in all 400 gold pieces I had of her, and bade me depart. So I went out from her, and came hither that I might pray Allah, extolled and exalted be he, to make her husband return to the cookmaid, that haply I might again be admitted to her favors. When the Emir of the pilgrims heard the man's story, he set him free, and said to the bystanders, Allah upon you, pray for him, for indeed he is excusable. And men also tell the tale of the Mock Caliph. It is related that the Caliph, Harun al-Rashid, was one night restless with extreme restlessness. So he summoned his vizier, Jafar the Barsamite, and said to him, My breast is straitened, and I have a desire to divert myself tonight by walking about the streets of Baghdad and looking into folks' affairs. But with this precaution, that we disguise ourselves in merchants' gears, so none shall know us. He answered, Hearkening and obedience. They rose at once, and doffing the rich raiment they wore, donned merchants' habits, and sallied forth 3 in number, the Caliph, Jafar, and Masrur the sorter. Then they walked from place to place till they came to the Tigris, and saw an old man sitting in a boat. So they went up to him, and saluting him, said, O Sheikh, we desire thee of kindness and favor to carry us a pleasuring down the river in this boat, and take this dinar for thy hire. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And so do I end my tale for the day, until it be morn.